Appraisal contingency. Let's talk about that. Being that I'm dealing with it on one of my transactions right now. An appraisal contingency is something that gives a buyer an out of a real estate transaction if the appraisal comes back lower than the agreed upon purchase price. Example, you agree of a price of $200,000. The appraiser comes back and says, hey, it's only worth $180,000. Bank's only going to loan based on the appraisal. You could come up with the difference, I guess, the other $20,000 if you wanted to. But the reality of it is most people do not do that. And so therefore, that gives you, the buyer, the ability to back out of the transaction and retain your earnest money escrow deposit. Caveat to that is the appraisal contingency is generally going to have a due date. If the buyer does not notify, or the buyer's agent does not notify the seller or the seller's agent, given a notice to the seller that says we are objecting to the original offer, and here's why, and they have to produce a copy of the appraisal report. All right, that's key. If they do that in a timely manner, it's up to the seller then to say, hey, good luck, buyer. Here's your escrow, your earnest money back, and good luck with your next home purchase. And we have to find a new buyer. And the seller has to contemplate dropping his asking price based on the appraisal. The trick here is, though, it is up to the buyer and the buyer's agent to deliver to the seller's agent, that notice in a timely manner. If the deadline is the 5th and they send that notice on the 7th, well, that's no good because the deadline was the 5th. So therefore, the contingency is deemed satisfied, and now the buyer's on the hook to purchase that house. So they're going to have to come up with that other $20,000, or in the good graces of the seller agrees to let them back out of it. But it can't be done with a handshake. I mean, it's got to be done legally. All the paperwork has to be properly filed. You have to serve notice to the original contingency and say, hey, we're based on this appraisal, this is what we're going to offer. Again, accompanied by the appraisal report, an addendum to the original contract establishing the new price that the buyer will pay, and then it has to be signed off by both the buyer and the seller. If that does not happen, Mr. Buyer, you're on the hook, and your agent, I guess, should have done a better job and made sure that all these things were done in a timely manner. And because now the seller could potentially keep your earnest money in your escrow. It's his right. The other thing is if you are buying or if you are selling, please be sure that your agent keeps you informed of those dates and when everything is due. Okay? Because it makes for a really messy transaction if the buyer's agent, and it is not the seller's agent's job to stay on top of the buyer and say, hey, you missed your inspection deadline. Hey, you missed your appraisal deadline. Hey, you missed this deadline. And then at the end, have the buyer come back and say, well, I just don't want to buy it, and here's why. That's not the way that real estate works. I hope that your agent right now is working for you 100% of the time, and they don't have their interest at heart, but they have your best interest at heart, because that's how it should be. So if you're thinking about buying or selling, know I'm going to stay on top of things for you. Give me a call, Realty One Group Preferred. We work as a team. All of my transactions goes through my broker and our team so that we can present for the seller in the best light. And when we do represent the buyer, we are making sure that the buyer is protected. And that's what your agent should be doing for you. Hope to have a couple more of these things coming out here shortly. We'll stay on top of it, random topics, and hoping to have some guests too. So, I need listings. Listings are short in Algoma and the surrounding area. So if you're thinking about listing, free market analysis for you. Love to come out and meet you, shake hands, sit down, and see what we can do to get your house sold. Thank you.